think he would have been the first to admit it. However, he could do things with the trumpet that no one else could do. It was just incredible. And I remember I had this great idea. I found a recording in my collection of his ex-wife, Betty Grable, made with Harry James. And she had died some years before, and they'd been divorced even longer than that. And I know we put it on, and I felt so terrible because James was getting a little teary-eyed. And I thought, oh my gosh, what have I done? Is this the right thing? Is this going to be a big mistake or something? Well, actually, when the record was over, he looked at me and he said, did you find that record? I says, yeah. And he patted me on the head. He says, thank you so much. I haven't heard that for many years. It was wonderful. So that was a nice thing. And there were some problems. Sometimes on our show, our host, Richard Hertz, had this magnificent, sonorous bass voice. It was penetrating. And I can remember one night we were playing records, and he used to regale us. There was another fellow running the console until I learned how to play it later, use it later. But he was telling dirty jokes. The phone rings. It's the station manager. And he says, turn the mic off. I can hear every word Dick's saying. And so we checked the pots. That's what they call them, the pots. They were like the volume controls. And everything had been turned off. And apparently his voice was so deep and so rich that it was actually causing the stylus on the recording arm to pick up his sounds. Can you believe this? These were the most horrible jokes you've ever heard in my life. And he just thought it was very funny, and we just moved along. But there was a lot of crazy moments like that. I remember one night we played a record, and it kept skipping. So he just leaned over from where he was sitting and just pulled the record right off the turntable. Zip, right on the air, just zip, and then threw it out the window. And approximately 5 minutes later, the guy showing up for the midnight shift comes in holding his eye and a record in the other hand. And he says, I just got hit by a flying record. We said nothing. But yeah, he was quite the guy, Mr. Hertz. And he kind of took me under his wing. I guess you would say he was sort of a mentor to me, and corrected my grammar frequently and things like that. So I was actually very grateful to him for these things. And there was one evening, he had one of our sponsors. We were a sustained show, Trey. I don't know if you know what that means, but it means that we went without advertising.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we weren't covered by advertising. Sustained show, you had to get your own advertising for the show. We had a couple of sponsors. My dad had an ad on there. But one of the restaurants we had was called the Crab Trap. And he got on the air one night to do the spot for the Crab Trap, and it came out, everybody loves the Crab Trap. And he didn't say anything for a minute afterwards. It was quite awkward, So I think he realized what he had done, so I just picked the script up and read the rest of it, and that was the end of it. But we had a lot of crazy stories like that. And now we'll get back to some of the people we interviewed again. I guess... let's see. I think one of my favorite people was Woody Herman. He was another wonderful fellow, and he really took a liking to me. I don't know why. Maybe, again, it was because of my age, which might have impressed him, because I knew all about these people, and had a lot of questions for him. And he almost seemed to be talking to me when we were interviewing him. He always was looking at me. Mm-hmm. And so there was a point where we really weren't expecting him to show up that night. And I only had a bunch of his records, but they were the very familiar ones, some of his big hits, like Woodchopper's Ball and so forth. And of course we played those, and then we ran out of records. So during the breaks, I went out to the hall where they had a big collection of LPs. They were at the station was at that point was switching to tape, but they still had their huge collection of the records out in the hallway, and I'm there right. Nothing's in order, and I'm just rifling through all these things looking for Woody Herman records. And he come out of the studio, and he sat down. He got on his hands and knees, and he's helping me. And he turns to me and he says, "Michael, how did you wind up with that big dope?" He always says, "You asked the. I wish you would just ask the questions. This questions are really stupid." And he had his finger up to his lip. "Don't say anything." I said, "No, I won't." But it was funny about him because he found these. He was looking through the records and he's pulling up like Stan Getz or something. And I haven't heard this in years. Do you think we could play some tracks on this? I said, "Sure." And then he'd find another record, and he says, "There's some great stuff on this. It wasn't his own, it was somebody else's." Mm-hmm. And I just thought, like I said, that's how down to earth these people were. And so we wound up, I guess, finishing the hour with Woody Herman playing the DJ, introducing these records and talking about them, and expertly, of course. So he was a very swell guy. He had a very infectious laugh, and I really liked him. It was sad that we only could get him on that one time, but I'm glad I met him. Really wonderful fellow. And then on the other hand, now we had Stan Kenton on, and he was a very jittery, excitable man. I think he drank about 15 pots of coffee while we were on the air. And I don't know, 15 packs of Newports or something. But the funny thing about him was that despite all that, he was very laconic. You really couldn't force too many words out of him. You had to prize them out. So he was really tough to interview. But like I said, you could tell he was really nervous or something. I understand that was sort of a trademark of his. But he was good, and he was quite funny. He at one point in the 50s, he came out with a series of albums with the title Artistry in, and then there would be like Artistry in Rhythm, Artistry in Drums, Artistry in Brass. He had a series of all these. And he says, I hope I can say this on the air, because he did. He says, we actually were planning to do something called Artistry and Farting. But he said, when the musicians got to the staccato notes, they did something in their pants. Well, that was all we needed to hear. But that was about the only funny thing he said. But it was good, And let's see, going down the line, I think the next one was Benny Goodman. This was very interesting, Trey. He was performing at the convention hall. Atlantic City had the biggest convention hall in the world at that time. And he was giving a concert there. And so we had arranged ahead of time to go backstage after the show and interview him on tape. And I knew when we watched the show, there was something wrong, because he didn't show up for the first half of the performance. He just had his sidemen playing, and they were quite good. Then he came out for the second part, and I sensed there was something strange about that. But needless to say, after the show, we proceeded to his dressing room, and he was he was very professorial, I guess is the word, in his bearing. He came across as sort of an Ivy League music teacher, very straight-faced, not a humorous man, really. Mm-hmm. Although you could tell he was nice, but he was not prone to joking or anything. And we conducted the interview with him, and he was, he shared a lot of information. He really loved his clarinet. He could, I get the sense that he could talk for many hours about the clarinet alone, just the instrument. Not music per se, but just the clarinet itself. And it's funny because I've long considered the clarinet one of my favorite instruments. It approximates the human voice very well, And he was, like I said, he was very nice, very professional. But we found out, I guess a couple of weeks later, that very night he was ready to go on stage. He'd gotten a call from New York that his wife had died.
Oh my!
Yeah, and this is why he wasn't in for that first act, first curtain. But he never mentioned it. I was just amazed at this man. He never talked about it. I suspect he just didn't want to ruin the interview for us, or he could have canceled it quite easily. But you wouldn't have known it. So I really have to commend him for it. I wish we had really known in a way. Of course, we wouldn't have done it had we known. But like I said, I think that was the biggest name, and I guess the biggest thrill for me was meeting the king of swing himself. And he could really play expertly. I think the last time I saw him play was a PBS fundraiser. I believe it was in 1988. And he had a pickup band. A pickup band is one that is just selected for the occasion. It's not like they tour with you or anything like that. They're all assembled for a broadcaster show. But my goodness, it was the best band I'd heard him play with in many years. They were really at top form. And I think that gave him a little impetus, a little push, because he just played magnificently that night. Like I'd never heard him in many years. And then he died about 2 weeks later. So very interesting man. He was, he created swing. I think he really was the one. He was a great swing clarinetist. There's an argument that persists to this very day about who played better, Artie Shaw or Benny Goodman. And I'd had to analyze that quite carefully and listen to him for many hours. I love both of them. But I'd have to say that Benny Goodman swung better than Artie Shaw. He was better at extemporaneous jazz, I think, whereas Shaw did some magnificent things. I mean, he invented new fingerings for the clarinet to play notes people had never heard before. And he had a lustrous, romantic tone. He had a wonderful tone to his clarinet, but when he played jazz, it didn't sound extemporized. It sounded like he had rehearsed it very well, So I think that was the big difference between the two of them. I want to settle that argument by saying that I think Benny Goodman was the greatest jazz clarinetist, whereas Artie Shaw was maybe the greatest clarinetist, and just his virtuosity with his instrument and the tone and the keys he could hit. I think that's the fine line that separates them. We tried to get Artie Shaw on the show via telephone. I had written him a letter. I was quite aware that he had quit the music industry. I think back in the mid-50s. He just laid his clarinet down and never played again. But I wrote to him in the vain hopes that maybe we could still have something of an interview with him. And I was surprised that he wrote back, which I thought he would ignore my letter, but actually he wrote back. He was really nice about it. But he explained that, he had no interest in talking about his past career in music, for a variety of reasons, that he'd left the music field behind forever. But curiously, I would say 5 years afterwards, he formed a band under his name that toured the United States. So I don't think I think he really did miss the music industry. But he was another one. I wished we'd had him interviewed. But like I said, we had so many other people. There was somebody, where was it?
Yeah, there was a few others. Count Basie.
Yeah. Oh, Count Basie. Oh, my goodness, yeah. How did I forget him? That was quite an ordeal for me because he was scheduled to come on that night with us, and Richard got a telephone call that we had a household emergency, and he had to leave. well, that just left me. And by this point,